relic of a primitive world. Snow fell in heavy, silent sheets over the jagged ridgelines of Cenov Prime, a backwater ice world humans had once colonized during the first expansion era. Now, it was just another annexed territory under the rule of the Galactic Concord, a coalition of alien empires that thought itself untouchable. Centurion Carval of the Concord's 3rd Occupation Legion stood atop the steel ramp of his dropship, arms folded, watching his armored soldiers fan out across the frozen valley. Their exosuits emitted soft hisses and status beeps, their rifles humming with the power of particle cores. He sneered beneath his visor. "Primitive world," he muttered. "Barely worth the fuel it took to get here." Scanners had picked up scattered resistance, a few thermal signatures, buried metal, and primitive communication relays. Nothing serious. No artillery, no shielding grid, no sign of orbital defenses. Just a few stubborn mammals clutching their obsolete rifles in snow-covered bunkers. He'd seen it before. Occupation always followed the same script. Nearby, a young alien trooper laughed, pointing toward the ridge where a figure stood in plain view. The soldier held an old-style ballistic rifle, wooden stock worn and scratched from age. "That one's got a slug thrower," the trooper chuckled. "Are they reenacting a war or defending their snow farm?" Laughter rippled through the Concord ranks. That figure, Sergeant Thomas Mason, Earthborn, veteran of the Martian border skirmishes, stood calmly at the edge of a ridge. He leaned on the antique rifle like a walking stick, letting the aliens have their moment. "Idiots," whispered Corporal Jen Reyes, crouched behind him in the snow. Mason didn't respond immediately. His eyes scanned the valley, noting troop placements, how the Concord forces clustered in the narrowest part of the ice shelf. He smiled just a little. "They're right," Mason finally said. "This thing's old. Shoots half the time. Barrels warped from a plasma burned back on Demo's Ridge." Reyes raised a brow. "Then why carry it?" Mason patted the rifle fondly. "Sentimental. Plus, it makes him laugh. And when they're laughing, they're not paying attention." A deep crackle came over the Concord loudspeakers. Centurion Carval's voice, cold and mocking. "Attention, human resistance. This is your final offer. Lay down your relics and surrender. You are outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. We'll even let you keep your museum pieces." The human comms remained silent. Carval frowned. "Fire a warning shot." A Concord hover drone surged forward and unleashed a bright bolt that slammed into the ridge beside Mason. Ice and snow burst upward in a cloud. The humans vanished from view. The troopers advanced, confident now. It was always like this. Suppress, mock, dominate. But 20 meters behind the ridge, hidden under camouflage netting and snow-covered thermal blankets, something far older and far more dangerous was stirring. Reyes sprinted into the pit where the HR-17 Thunderclap lay dormant, half-buried. The anti-tank gun, a behemoth of a rail cannon, was a relic of the last colonial war. Nearly forgotten, nearly scrapped. But Mason had found it in a derelict weapons depot 3 months ago and swore it would speak again. "Power stable," Reyes called. "Coil integrity at 94%. She's ready." Mason descended into the pit, placing his antique rifle down beside him. "Then let's give him a real history lesson." On the surface, the Concord forces advanced to the midpoint of the valley, tight, boxed in by rock faces and ice walls. Carval gave the signal to advance and mop up whatever was left. Then, with the sound of metal screaming against magnetic force, the HRG-17 fired. The rail cannon's shot was silent at first, just a flicker in the snowstorm. Then came the impact. One of the lead APCs erupted into flame and molten metal, the projectile punching clean through it and out the other side, cratering into the frozen wall behind. The laughter stopped. "What was that?" a Concord trooper yelled. Carval scrambled for a feed from the drones, but static fuzzed the screens. Jamming. The humans had activated localized interference. A second shot rang out. Another vehicle went up in a blaze. Troopers began to fall back. This wasn't in the simulation files. Back at the gun, Mason stood over the smoking weapon, watching steam rise from the rail coils. Reyes grinned. That got their attention. Mason picked up his rifle, slung it over his shoulder, and lit a battered cigar. "Let him laugh," he said. "Just gives us time to aim." The sleeping giant awakens. A deep, echoing hum resonated through the underground chamber as capacitors recharged. Glowing blue coils flickered with residual energy, and frost steam from the surface of the Thunderclap's rail. Snow and debris still rattled down from the camouflage tarp above, disturbed by the shockwave of the first two shots. Corporal Reyes wiped sweat from her brow despite the freezing air. "Charge levels at 62%. We can fire again in 30 seconds. Mason knelt beside her, adjusting the manual targeting yoke. "Good. Let's make it count. They'll send the big ones next." Outside, the valley had gone from arrogance to chaos. The once formal ranks of the Concord 3rd Occupation Legion had scattered behind rocks and terrain features. Smoke curled from the burning wreckage of 2 APCs, their alloy hulls split open like tin cans. Above the chaos, Centurion Carval screamed into his comlink, face flushed purple with rage. "Deploy hover armor. Push them out of the ice shelf. I want that weapon offline now." In orbit above Cenov Prime, a Concord frigate released 2 GH-7 hover tanks, each bristling with plasma turrets and shield generators. The tanks descended like silent gods of war, engines roaring as they cut through the atmosphere. Back in the gun pit, Mason listened as their spotters reported the incoming threats. 2 hover tanks inbound from the South Ridge. ETA 90 seconds, called out Private Yarrow from his forward perch. "Of course they're sending hover armor," Reyes muttered, "because clearly we weren't outnumbered enough already." Mason didn't flinch. Let him come. The Thunderclap was made for things that thought they were invincible. As Reyes toggled the targeting lens to infrared, she saw them. 2 glowing heat signatures descending fast. Mason grabbed a thick cable running from the gun to a field battery. "How much juice we got?" "Enough for 1 high-energy overcharge," Reyes replied. "But it'll burn the coils and take the targeting offline. After that, it's a glorified paperweight." "1 shot," Mason said. "That's all we'll need." Above the valley, the GH-7 tanks broke through the storm cloud cover and dropped low, kicking up snow in their wake. Their sensors pinged across the field, triangulating the Thunderclap's position. Carval watched from his command console, his confidence slowly returning. In them, the lead tank locked on to the energy signature and fired. A pulse of bright blue plasma lanced toward the pit. Mason and Reyes ducked as the energy blast scorched the snow above, igniting part of the camo netting. "We're good," Reyes called. "Targets painted, ready for overcharge." Mason steadied his breath. This wasn't like the smooth, remote firing systems the Concord used. This was old-school war. Manual calibration, gut instinct, and steel nerves. The barrel glowed with pulsing light as energy flooded the coils. The gun whined, vibrating as it reached critical charge. Mason shouted, firing. The shot ripped through the air like a vengeful thunderbolt. The magnetic pulse cracked the surrounding ice and shook the valley. The lead hover tank's shield caught the projectile, briefly. The anti-tank slug, accelerated to hypersonic speed, punched through the plasma field, tore into the armored undercarriage, and detonated deep inside. The explosion turned the tank into a flaming wreck mid-air, debris scattering across the snowy cliffs. The second tank banked hard, retreating behind cover. The sensor operator shouted across the Concord channel. "That weapon pierced a GH-7. Repeat, our shielding was compromised." Carval's face turned to stone. "Pull them back. Reroute orbital strikes. We'll glass the entire ice shelf if we have to." In the pit, smoke filled the chamber. The thunderclaps sizzled, coils blackened from the overcharge. "She's done," Reyes said, coughing. "Targeting array is fried. Might be able to rewire the capacitors in a few hours, but that was it." Mason didn't reply immediately. He just stared up toward the valley ridgeline, where the burning tank's wreckage still tumbled down the slope. "1 shot," he said finally. "That's all it ever takes, if it lands in the right place." Reyes looked over. "They'll be back, with something worse." Mason stood, grabbing his old rifle again and slinging it over his shoulder. Let them. The Concord thinks war is about technology. But they forgot something. What? War is about fear. And right now, they're afraid of one old gun buried in the snow. Far above Cenov Prime, on the Concord command deck, Carval watched the feed go dark. Every unit in the valley was now requesting fallback orders. Fear had replaced superiority. One weapon, one forgotten piece of old Earth hardware, had shattered their illusion of dominance. He snarled to his tactical advisor, "I want every classified file on that weapon. How many more of those things do they have?" The advisor looked nervous. "Sir, records from the Human Colonial Archives suggest thousands." Carval's eye twitched. "Then we've made a mistake. A very dangerous mistake." Shock and retaliation. The wreckage of the GH-7 hover tank smoldered in the snow, a twisted carcass of once indomitable Concord engineering. The snowstorm carried plumes of black smoke through the valley, blanketing the retreating alien soldiers in a haze of ash and fear. On the ridge, Sergeant Thomas Mason looked down through a pair of scratched binoculars. The Concord forces, once tightly organized, were in a full withdrawal to fallback zones near their drop ships. What had begun as a confident sweep had devolved into chaos. Behind Mason, Corporal Reyes tightened her scarf and kicked a loose piece of scorched coil from the Thunderclap's rail. "She's dead," she confirmed, voice low. "Totally burned out. We need a new firing coil, realignment module, in about 3 weeks." "Doesn't matter," Mason muttered, still watching the enemy. "They already lost." Reyes frowned. "But they're regrouping. They've got more armor inbound, maybe even air support. You really think we can hold?" "I don't need to hold," Mason said, stepping back and shouldering his antique rifle again. "I just need them to think twice. Every second, they spend fearing what else we might have, what other primitive relics we've buried out here. That's a second they're not pressing the attack." Below, Centurion Carval was doing exactly that, thinking twice. Inside a field command dome hastily deployed near the edge of the valley, he slammed his armored fist into the console. Tactical officers surrounded him, faces pale under glowing HUDs. "We lost a hover tank," Carval growled. "To a slug-based weapon." "Explain that." A pale, four-eyed technician cleared his throat. The projectile weapon utilized magnetic acceleration far beyond Concord norms. The rail system, if we're correct, was overcharged manually, bypassing safety protocols. Primitive, Carval spat, yet effective. "We believe," the technician continued nervously, "that the humans are employing guerrilla-era tactics, drawing us into kill zones, using ancient weapons as psychological warfare. It's clever." Carval stared at the tactical map. Red icons blinked, marking disabled vehicles, failed drone sweeps, and electronic jamming across the snowy ridges. The humans were outgunned, outnumbered, and still winning. "Bring in the sweeper units," Carval ordered. "I want every cave, tunnel, and crevice scanned. They won't catch us off guard again." Back at the human resistance camp, nestled deep in an ice cavern, a handful of militia fighters gathered around Mason and Reyes. The makeshift command room was lit by portable lanterns and a flickering holomap. One of the younger fighters, Jace, leaned forward. "They're pissed. You can hear it in their comms. They're scrambling. That tank kill hit them hard. They'll hit back," Mason said. "Harder. They've got aerial support, orbital coverage, better firepower, better everything." Reyes glanced at the holomap. "But they don't have terrain. We've got ice tunnels, thermal blind spots, geothermal vents. This planet's working with us, not them." Mason pointed at the map. "Here, Glacier Hollow. It's narrow, choked with wind and ice spires. Perfect for ambushes, set mines, and EMP charges. Hold them into a gauntlet." Jace looked uncertain. "And if they don't fall for it?" Mason gave a grim smile. "Then we make them." An hour later, Concord recon drones swept into Glacier Hollow, a canyon of twisting ice columns and sub-zero winds. The drones flew high, scanners sweeping for life signs or magnetic anomalies. They didn't detect the decoys, human thermal mannequins hidden behind rocks. nor did they catch the signal repeaters mimicking weak transmissions from the Thunderclap's coordinates. Carval's voice echoed from the mobile command center. I want confirmation. Is the weapon still operational? Unclear, a recon officer replied. Power readings are faint but present. We've triangulated several human units repositioning into the hollow. Carval nodded sharply. Then crush them. Send and the hounds. 3 heavy infantry units, armed with pulse cannons and shockwave grenades, dropped into the canyon under drone cover. Their boots cracked through ice as they advanced cautiously. They never saw the trip mines buried beneath the snowdrifts. The explosions hit first, plasma scrap and old Earth fragmentation tech rigged with modified Concord grenades. Then came the EMP charges, frying targeting HUDs and shutting down drone feeds. Finally, out of the ice tunnels came human fighters, silent, fast, brutal. Mason led the charge, firing his battered rifle like a relic king of war, dropping a Concord heavy with a clean shot to the throat joint. It was close quarters, dirty, desperate, and the aliens weren't ready. Minutes later, Carval watched from orbit as his ground feed turned to static. The elite sweepers had been eliminated. His mouth curled into a snarl. Enough of this guerrilla theater. He turned to his orbital weapons officer. Target the ridge. Begin atmospheric suppression strikes. But sir, there's still Concord units. Then they'll die with the rest, Carval snapped. Down on Cenov Prime. Mason looked up as the first glow appeared in the sky. A pulsing shimmer. Reyes ran up to him. Orbital weapons coming online. Mason stared at the flickering heavens. They're losing the ground war, so now they'll burn the planet. Reyes bit her lip. So what do we do? He looked back toward the destroyed tank, then to the shattered Thunderclap. We send a message, Mason said. They may erase the battlefield, but they won't erase the fear. The day humans fought back, the sky burned above Cenov Prime. Rings of crimson energy spiraled down through the cloud cover. Orbital suppression strikes. Concord's final answer when ground superiority failed. Each blast slammed into the icy terrain with devastating force, vaporizing chunks of glacier and igniting atmospheric gases. The frozen valley became a furnace of plasma and shattered ice. In a buried command tunnel beneath the resistance stronghold, Sergeant Mason stood over the comms console, listening to the static scream of fried relay towers. The orbital jamming had begun. "We've got minutes," Reyes said, breathless, dragging in the last crate of hardened data drives. They're turning Cenov Prime into a glass ball. Mason nodded slowly. That's not what they're here for. They don't want to win this world. They want to erase what happened here. A low rumble shook the tunnel. Dust fell from the ice-packed ceiling. Jace, his face pale, looked from one to the other. Then why haven't we evacuated? If the Thunderclap's gone, if we can't hold, why are we still here? Mason turned. Because it's not about holding the ground. It's about holding the story. Above them, the final phase of Operation Obelisk, humanity's classified psychological warfare program, had quietly begun. A stealth UN intelligence vessel, cloaked and silent, hovered just beyond Concord sensor range in the upper atmosphere. Its objective, extract battle data, transmit the truth, and prove that the so-called primitive humans had dealt a fatal blow to an elite galactic legion with a 300-year-old gun. In the data chamber, encrypted feeds came alive. A team of analysts watched drone footage of the destroyed JH-7 tank. Mason's face, scarred, hard, defiant, appeared overlaid with the words. They laughed at the rifle. Then it shredded their best. Carval stood aboard his warship's observation deck, hands gripping the railing. His anger had cooled into something colder, dread. The full orbital barrage had failed to produce clarity. Resistance communications had ceased, yes, but no bodies recovered, no final footage, and no real confirmation that the weapon or its operators had been destroyed. Where is the proof? He hissed. I want proof that the gun is gone. His sensor chief hesitated. Sir, we've detected encrypted signals bouncing off the ionosphere. Human tech, classified class. From where? From below the ridge. Carval's eyes widened. They're broadcasting. In the ice cavern, Reyes finished uplinking the last transmission. Sweat ran down her temple despite the sub-zero temperature. Jace gave her a thumbs up. "It's out," he said. "Every human listening post in range will get it. So will half the underworld networks in the fringe systems." Mason gave a slow, grim nod. "Good. Then we've won." Another quake shook the cave. The planet was groaning now, torn between plasma strikes and tectonic disruption. Cracks formed along the ceiling. Reyes looked at him. "We need to leave." Mason didn't move. "I've got nowhere to go," he said quietly. "But you, Reyes, Jace, you've got time. There's a southern cave exit. Take it. Get to the evac beacon. You'll find a UN ship waiting." "What about you?" Reyes asked. Mason slung his old rifle off his shoulder and set it down gently next to the Thunderclap, now scorched and blackened. "I started this fight with this gun," he said. "Might as well finish it with it, even if it doesn't fire." Jace blinked. "That's suicide." Mason smirked. "No, son. That's a statement." 20 minutes later, a Concord recon unit landed on the ravaged ridge. Smoke curled from cracks in the earth. Their scanners found no movement, no weapon signatures, just heat ghosts and scattered tech fragments. Carval, now on the surface in full combat armor, stepped into the ruins. The pit was still there. So was Mason. He sat on a crate, hunched forward, hands resting on his old rifle, his face stoic beneath a layer of ash and frost. Carval raised a weapon. "You're the one responsible for all this?" Mason looked up. "Just the messenger." "Where's the gun?" Mason smiled faintly. "It's right here." Carval laughed dryly. "That? It's nothing." Mason leaned back. "Then why are your men afraid to come closer?" Carval stepped forward anyway. "You can't win. The galaxy belongs to the Concord." Mason's tone turned sharp. "You lost the moment you laughed. Because we remember every time someone underestimated us. You brought war, and we brought history." Carval's weapon shook slightly. Then a new sound echoed in the air. A low roar. From above. Carval looked up just in time to see a sleek human dropship decloaking directly overhead. The UN stealth vessel dropped a pod and extracted Mason in a flash of engine light and hot wind. Concord troopers scrambled for cover, but the ship was already gone, vanishing into cloud and static before they could react. Mason was alive. The Thunderclap's wreckage was real, and the data had been sent. Days later, across neutral systems, spaceports, black markets, and interworld colonies, a viral image spread. A human man, old and defiant, sitting beside a monstrous, scorched weapon, smoke and ruin behind him. The caption read, "They brought soldiers. We brought a story. They mocked our rifle, until we unveiled the gun that shattered their pride." Epilogue. Carval was reassigned. The Concord issued a vague report about unexpected resistance and quietly pulled back from fringe planets. Humanity didn't win the war that day, but they won something far worse for the enemy. Reputation, fear, doubt. Across the stars, alien commanders began asking questions before engaging humans. Questions like, what else do they have buried? What else are they hiding? And how many more old men with old guns are out there, waiting